Hello, everyone, and welcome to another NPDA Edge webinar. My name is Dave McMahon. I'm the Executive Director of the NPDA and thrilled to have you guys all joining us today. Man, we've got a great lineup of attendees, and as you can see here on the screen, also a fantastic lineup of presenters. So if you're here for any reasons related to education, development, growth, and of course, excellence, you guys are in the right spot. Man, this is, you guys are flying in here quickly. Appreciate everybody taking a little time. I'm just going through the dealer list here, and we've got some guys who I think most of us go back 10, 20, 30, maybe even more years on. So awesome to see you guys. Feel free to jump in the chat there and let us know where you're calling in from. One of the things we want to make sure we do too is just to increase that participation level here throughout the course of the webinar. So you'll see some poll questions come up. I know that's not a shocker to many of you who've been on webinars that I've been on. So if you wouldn't mind taking a half second and answering the poll questions, that'll help everything go. We've got a fantastic lineup, as I mentioned. You know, the Standing Hat Group at Morgan Stanley is a strategic partner of ours. You've seen them hopefully with their support of us and the association just throughout the the last couple of years, in fact. And I just want to show you guys kind of what we have coming up here for the Edge webinar series. It's going to be with Zach Matern from APR Commercial Risk Management and Sell Brokerage here in June, and then also with Tony Altieri from NPA as well. And that's going to be another one in June. So going forward, you'll see the Edge webinars twice a month. And a lot of you guys have not missed one yet, and we look forward to that perfect streak continuing. So we're having a lot of fun with these. Hopefully, making you smarter about your business. That's what's going to happen today, and just gaining some insight from some real experts in their field, as the ones we've had to this point and today, and then going forward as well. But yeah, as I mentioned, Standing Hat Group at Morgan Stanley, great partner of ours, to the point where they even offered up to create an intro for me today. So I don't often enough say yes to help, as the case with a lot of us, but in this case I did. So we'll get off. Let's see, we'll do a stop share here and get this thing going. So the power sports industry, as you know, is in the midst of rapid and unpredictable change, from shifting tariffs and economic headwinds to evolving merger and acquisition trends. Today's market forces are creating new challenges and new opportunities for dealers across the country. And some of them even have cats on their webinars here. But Mark will be back shortly. If you're a dealer trying to understand what all this means for your valuation, your exit strategy, or your growth plans, you're not alone. The good news, you don't have to navigate uncertainty without the guidance of the NPDA. Today's webinar brings together a powerhouse panel of NPDA partners from across the country, voices who not only understand the numbers, but the unique pressures and opportunities you face as a dealership owner or operator. Today, you're going to hear from Brad Stanek and Paulina Mattel of the Standing Hat Group at Morgan Stanley, experts in dealership financial and succession planning, as well as Mark Sheffield, 20 Group Moderator at NCM Associates, bringing on-the-ground operational insights from dealers nationwide, and Courtney Bernhard from Performance Brokerage Services, buy-sell experts who have brokered over 900 successful dealership transactions. Whether you're thinking about growth, succession, or simply trying to make smarter financial decisions amid industry volatility, this session will help equip you with the strategic insights to move forward with clarity and confidence. And I'm going to move forward for sure, having Morgan Stanley create these intros for me, because that was that was perfect, and appreciate the assist. And without further ado, we'll move on and kick things off with Brad Stanek from the Standing Hat Group at Morgan Stanley.
Thank you, Dave, and welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. I was thinking about and preparing for today. Got a lot of admiration for my grandfather. He was a small business owner, like all of you. He owned a hardware store in Dyer, Indiana. He worked harder than anyone I know, much like you. Treated everyone right, just like you. And he never gave up, like many of you as well. You guys run successful dealerships because of this and much more. Your goal, become even more financially secure and independent. Your dealership does provide for this, but also you want to be financially independent at a point in time when you exit. And the proceeds from the sale must be able to do that for you. support you and those you care about for the rest of your life. And it's not easy, right? There's curveballs that are thrown at you right or left. 2008, COVID, and now the new set of economic challenges we're faced with here today. Well, we're here today to guide you through all of this and to provide you with the actions you can take to come out on the other side of this stronger for it. When we look at the economic challenges that are out there today, Paulina, I'll turn to you first. A lot of economic uncertainty going on. How long is it going to last? And if I'm a dealer, am I going to be okay?
Yeah, that's a good starting question, Brad. And as you've mentioned, the dealers just joining us on the line today. First of all, thank you just for carving out the time to really take an hour and help plan ahead. You've heard Brad say this, you've built this dealership from ground up. You've made it through the recessions, parts shortages, labor challenges, pandemic less than 5 years ago, just to name a few. But I think now, like many of your peers, you're just left wondering if this time is different with the tariffs. And at the end of the day, will we be okay? Let's face it, your dealership needs to stay profitable, not only this year, but for many years to come. The way we view this, that's your largest asset, and it may amount to 70 to 90% of your retirement at some point in the future. So Brett, to answer your question, what are we seeing on the economic and the financial side? First off, a more confident stock market, which tends to lead to a more confident consumer. And if someone is financing or even paying in cash for a side-by-side, for a bike, that usually means their job feels secure and their portfolio and their savings are in a good place. But let's be honest, a lot has happened in the last 4 months, and current indicators show that we do have a more secure stock market, and directionally, it's likely going to stay that way. So Morgan Stanley actually came out just a few days ago and sees the odds of recession dropping to 30%, down from 50% just a few weeks prior. And that actually aligns with what we're hearing from other major banks as well. The other thing I want to bring into focus is our GDP, right, or how we measure our economic growth. It's still growing, although modestly, and that's the key word here. We're only forecasting a 1.4% growth in 2025, 0.6% of growth for 2026. So it's not explosive by any means, but it is a forward motion. The area we probably want to dive a little bit deeper to is how we take a look at that GDP, and that's consumer spending, because consumer spending accounts for 69% of our GDP. So the real question that we look for with dealers is how strong is the American consumer? And that's where the data gets a little concerning. Credit card usage is at a historical high of 45%, and savings are at their lowest level since 2007. That does not bode well for a lot of economic growth, as you can imagine, and really can contribute to further slowdown this or next year. And that will also impact to a degree the discretionary spending in industries like power sports, right? As people are getting more mindful about how and where they're spending their paycheck. So I think overall, expect this year to remain volatile. We're watching very closely for consumer confidence and consumer spending. In addition, we're obviously looking for clarity on the new normal for tariffs long term. And that being said, we're also starting to look out for any tax legislation, which may provide some economic relief later in the summer months or in the fall. So those are probably the key focus areas for us, Brad.
I appreciate it, Pauline. And I hear you say these things. It becomes clear that the economy, although it looks to be slightly positive, isn't going to come roaring back. And you can't expect the economy to be growing your top line. When you think of what Abraham Lincoln had said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. We need to create our futures. And how can we improve marketing to gain market share in your territory? Because it's not going to come because there's all these additional buyers coming back. And how do we get our sales force to be getting back to the selling basics when COVID, they could act more like order takers? How do we increase our absorption rates as a percentage of our fixed costs so that we can weather some of these tougher storms and have a more predictable income coming in? And for those that are looking at acquisitions, you're probably finding more motivated sellers now than over the last 4 years at a very fair price to you and to them. And so as we talked about earlier, you're successful for all the reasons we shared earlier. And the economy here is throwing us a curveball. It's expected to grow. You control your future. So ask yourself, what do you plan on doing about it? Have a plan. Now we've thrown a fair amount at you, and there's a lot of information that if you do your own research and read, watch the news, etc., how do you really take all that in? It'd be very easy to have paralysis by analysis. So, Paulina, if I'm a dealer, how do I sort through this? What should I know, and what do I need to look for to gain clarity?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Brad. I think it's one what people focused on a little bit more just in general, because clarity comes from focusing on the things we actually have control over, right? Unlike the tariffs. So at one point, whether it's soon or years down the road, your retirement will likely highly depend on your probability and your ability to sell your dealership. And let's be honest, that sale price is not going to be based on hope. And I know Courtney can speak to that extensively. It's going to be based on real profit, real leadership, and just repeatable results so that the buyer can really step in and move forward with confidence. But I think taking it a step back, what can we do about it today? It really starts with getting a plan in place. So what we tell dealers is start by asking yourself, what is your dealership really worth today? What would a buyer see if they looked under the hood? I mean, we're talking financials and processes. And the big one for us at Morgan Stanley is, what does your dealership, by far your single largest asset, need to be doing for you so that all of your other assets are working together and not in silos? If you've joined any of our prior NPDA webinars, we firmly believe in the power of planning, because unlike tariffs or interest rates or even elections, planning is something that you do actually have control over. If you haven't done so already, now is a great time to get a valuation of your dealership. If you're not necessarily selling tomorrow, it's still helpful because it can really help drive other factors. How we reduce taxes, how you protect your family, how you position yourself for even the best possible outcome. And we're talking about a full picture here, right? Your assets, your liabilities, your dealership real estate. And when you do that, I think what you start uncovering are both gaps and opportunities, things that you can fix, improve on, and even build on, especially in a year like this where there's a lot of uncertainty. And now look, we're not Warren Buffett, right? If he lost half of his $150 billion net worth, he'd still be fine. But for the rest of us, clarity is not optional, neither is planning. Again, especially in a year like this where there are so many unknown variables.
I think you hit the nail on the head. We talk about controlling your destiny and being able to do that with a plan that can give you the clarity on what to focus on. And so that you're focusing on the most important things to maximize your wealth, both in the dealership and outside of it. When we talk about maximizing that wealth, then it starts to come down to those that may be looking to sell, whether it be in the short term or even over the next 3 to 5 years. Courtney, for those dealers who are out there now who are looking to sell in this environment, what does the buy-sell market look like at this time?
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, especially for taking time. I know you are a very busy man. I know you try to read everything that you put out there. So hopefully I don't plagiarize anything that you've said. Yeah, the buy-sell market is, it's definitely interesting. It's active, but it has, rapidly changed. Valuations on transactions are decreasing, or as I like to say, maybe realigning, a trend that we have observed over the past year and a half, and expect to persist as buyers seek to kind of establish a new norm, for future profitability in the industry. And I think that, kind of part of this webinar is, what is that new norm? And I think everybody's still, trying to kind of figure that out. I think we all can agree that, performance during COVID was and is unsustainable. The current conditions, are indicating a softening in consumer confidence. Demand has decreased. Inventory is back to, pre-pandemic levels. And consequently, profitability is, stabilizing and in a lot of cases, unfortunately, declining. Again, the factors such as, interest rate hikes, rising unit costs are hindering, dealers' ability to move through inventory, which I'm seeing, you know, firsthand, you know, when I'm negotiating through buy sells, you know, how inventory can really, you know, affect that, and, you know, impacting profitability. You know, unfortunately, some dealers, you know, have had to make the tough decision to, you know, close their doors, which, you know, we're seeing, you know, online in the articles, you know, everybody's reading about it. People are, I mean, even people outside the industry that I talk with, you know, are saying, man, you know, Courtney, we were, you know, driving this market and we're seeing these empty buildings where, you know, these stores used to be. What's going on? You know, and I think while the power sports industry has fared relatively well amidst, you know, these challenges, it's still, you know, dealing with the same obstacles that are threatening profitability. It's, you know, increased floor plan expenses, you know, higher inventory levels, you know, payroll costs that are not, you know, going down. And then the whole reason, you know, we are on this webinar today, which is, you know, the T word tariffs. You know, all of that is influencing, you know, the buy sell market. I like the F word. The C word COVID, the T word tariffs, F word is fun, which is essentially what we're all really wanting to do, you know, is have fun.
Absolutely. You know, definitely a lot of challenges that are out there. If I'm willing to wait over the next 3 to 5 years for my exit, does my plan change at all, Courtney?
Man, and that goes back to me saying I wish I could carry a magic 8-ball. I think what I've learned, you know, most recently and, you know, preparing for an exit, I mean, there's all the normal things, right? Your real estate, you know, taking care of your real estate, cleaning up your depreciation schedule, just the internal parts of the dealership that you can work on, you know, over time to clean up. But more so is, you know, what's going on in the mechanics of, say, like your dealer agreements. You know, are you running a dealership? You're maybe in your mid 50s and you have aging parents that started it and they're actually the ones that are on these dealer agreements. You know, we have complicated, you know, trusts and estate plans and, you know, stock to deal with and, you know, brothers and sisters that are not getting along or whatever the situation is. I think really taking a look at that portion, because we know that sometimes it can be too late and become a lot messier if that portion, you know, isn't taken care of. And that's the last thing you want to think about, you know, if somebody were to pass or decide, you know, I want to get out, is having that portion cleaned up, because having to deal with, you know, your dealership running the business and then, you know, a person, you know, passing or getting ill, or whatever is, you know, it just kind of goes by the wayside, or you know, you need to get to it. We need to talk about it. We need to update it, but it doesn't get done. So that for me is, you know, definitely something to pay attention to. And again, going back to, as our dealer body is aging, so are their trusted advisors. CPAs are retiring. Their attorneys who know, you know, everything about them, you know, are aging out of the system. So it's, you know, if you don't have a plan, you know, to sell now in the next 3 to 5 years, you know, what's the age of your controller and those advisors? Are they going to be around to see, you know, see it to the end? Or are you going to have to bring somebody in new to learn the ropes?
Yeah, good point. I mean, even if I'm not looking 3 to 5 years and I'm thinking I'm going to hold on to this business indefinitely, plans change. Unfortunately, you know, at events where we see somebody pass occur unexpectedly, and being ready for those type of circumstances, along with a potential sale or succession plan to the kids or to the employees, makes a lot of sense, because you don't know what tomorrow brings. All good points, Courtney. Mark, if we start to dive into the economy, help dealers understand what tariffs may mean for their dealership.
I was kind of excited when I was asked to speak about tariffs, because everybody other than Russia was in the penalty box, and then by the time we got till today, you know, China's gone from 145% to 30%, and everyone else is at 25% plus or minus, and things seem to be somewhat business as usual. And then a couple of days ago, Besant came out and said that tariffs are probably going to be going up again here pretty quickly. So the uncertainty is probably, you know, one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with right now. I mean, at the dealership level, dealers need to be cognizant about price increases on vehicles, parts, accessories, and also just the cost of manpower as well. We're seeing some shipping delays on some products that are getting held up at the port as manufacturers wait to see if prices are going to come down. And there's also been a couple of strikes that have been going on that are impacting the ability to move some products across the country. Consumer uncertainty is probably one of the biggest issues that dealers are dealing with right now. Just, at one point in time, the prime customer was doing really well and not too impacted by what was going on. But, now that we've seen, some stock portfolios have dropped 10 or 20%, that's even impacting some of our prime customers at this point in time who are a little bit concerned about taking money out and locking in those losses, and maybe are just going to want to sit on the sidelines for a little bit longer. I think the biggest issue that we're seeing coming right now from all of this that dealers really hadn't thought about, though, was just market distortions. A lot of that comes from you can be the best dealer in your marketplace. You can do a great job of managing your inventory. You can have all the right product at the right time. But if you got a competitor 10 miles down the road and he's operating at the whim of what he hears on whatever news channel he tends to listen to, then, one day he's trying to make money and the next day he's trying to give everything away. And that's been something that's been really tough for dealers to handle at this point in time. It's something that not a lot of people planned on.
Definitely a new territory for sure. How is all of this then? You'd mentioned the stock market obviously having an impact on a customer's portfolio. Am I going to use that money, but I don't want to lock into a loss? What other financial impacts could tariffs be having on dealers' customers that create challenge?
Our economy is so large and so interconnected, not only within our country, but globally, that, I think we're all kind of making our best guess about, when government does this, here's going to be the outcome. But the reality is that we're in uncharted territories at this point in time. So we're all just making the best efforts day to day as small businesses to survive and live to fight another day. The biggest issue I think that is impacting dealers right now based on tariffs is just consumer hesitancy, both, prime and subprime customers. The inflation rates, I think that a lot of not only dealers, but consumers kind of came into this year thinking that we're going to see drops in rates, and the tariff uncertainty has definitely put a kink in that plan. I think, my personal guess is that we'll see a quarter point some point this year, maybe a second quarter point drop, but I think that that's probably going to be the most that we're going to see through the end of 2025. And, a lot of dealers at this point in time thought that, by now we would have seen a full point drop in rates. And when you look at the credit downgrade that happened over the weekend with Moody's and what impact that's had on our government investments, I mean, there's been a 30 basis point spike in bond rates or treasury rates over the last just 3 days. And that's going to impact the rates that consumers pay on every loan that they take out at this point in time. So I think that uncertainty in that lending environment that's being driven by these tariffs is going to be very problematic for dealers. One of the things that I've seen on the auto side is that dealers are starting to extend the loan rates at this point in time. I mean, it used to be odd for 84-month or a 96-month loan, but that's getting to be really commonplace at this point in time as dealers try to find ways to get rates down to an affordable level. But that can also be very short-sighted as well, because you are essentially, depending on how much a customer puts down, it might be 4 or 5 years before a customer is in an equity position to trade in again. And so what are we doing to the trade cycle down the road? I mean, we really are kicking the can down the road at this point in time. I think, one of the other impacts that we're going to see with customers is just hold on to their vehicles for longer. You're starting to see that used prices are increasing in some areas, and you may get some consumers that go, hey, I'm going to hold on to this for another 6 months and see if I can get a little bit more money for it, get a little bit more use out of it. Or on the counter side is just that I can't afford anything new, so I'm going to hold on to what I've got for a short period of time, or maybe another year or 2 years, and just wait to see what things are like a couple years down the road. So definite uncertainty is the only certainty right now.
I mean, a lot of challenges obviously out there for the dealership, but also, as you've mentioned, underlying customer as well. And what advice do you have to dealers then to try and manage through this and hopefully mitigate some of the impacts of all that's going on?
Long list of things. I consistently talk about dealers knowing the difference between their business partners and their vendors, and that to me is a pretty easy item to ascertain. There's an exercise we do with our 20 group members in NCM to help them figure out who that is. I think that, especially for a lot of multi-line dealers, you're not going to be able to placate everybody. You're not going to be able to make every vendor happy. So quit trying and, figure out, who your business partners are, double down with them. Make sure that you've got a plan in place on how you're going to deal with tariffs. We haven't seen many of the 26 models released at this point in time. I think Kawasaki was one of the first to market at this point in time. And, price increases have been pretty manageable at this point in time. The 26s that Kawasaki's released have had a 3 to 5 point price increase on them. So whereas dealers were all freaked out that, oh, we're going to have a 25% price increase, at least the ones who, didn't read some of the content that we had put out at the NPDA, that wasn't going to be the case. I think it's important that you have a plan in place so that if you start seeing price increases, you know how to deal with that internally and with your customers. Are you going to just include it in the price of the products that you're selling? Are you going to have a line item where you're going to say, hey, this is the tariff price increase, and it's here for as long as the tariffs exist, and it's going to go away when these tariffs go away. And then also figure out with the technology that you utilize how you're going to incorporate that. There are a lot of nuances to the DMSs we use about what they support. So make sure that, again, you've thought ahead and you know how you're going to put that in place. Manage reward and risk. So with the uncertainty about what products are going to look like down the road, we know that some manufacturers actually have products in place that we can buy now. And I think that you've got to really put your head down and figure out, how much product should we take in today with high interest rates on the inventory that we're holding? And, what do we reasonably think that we can get rid of before the end of the current season? There's some dealers who are taking on way too much inventory. And, if business remains good through the back half of the year, they'll be perfectly fine. But if the economy starts to fall apart, that product is just like we saw in 2009, is going to be what puts some dealers into the wall and causes them to file for bankruptcy. I mean, Courtney talked about it a little bit. We're seeing some news articles about the dealers that are going out of business. But that's really only the bigger dealers. It's sad to say, but there are quite a few dealers who have gone out of business just in the last 6 months. And there's probably a lot more who are going to go out of business this year. So I think you've got to be very, very cautious of inventory, because that is the biggest risk that a lot of dealers take on. And then just be cognizant of the used market. Used continues to be very good. It seems like prices are holding well. And in a high tariff environment, used could actually increase in value. I don't think we're going to see the kind of increases that we saw during the pandemic. But I think as long as you're a good used manager, as long as you have a good system in your dealership to handle that, and you can turn that used inventory quickly within 30 to 60 days, I wouldn't hesitate to go deep on used. So I just think it continues to be a good play. It's historically for most dealers, when you look at their website traffic, used for a lot of dealers can represent 10% of the inventory that they've got, yet it drives half of the website leads that they see. So it also has a side benefit of getting traffic to the dealer. But I think used continues to be a good play as long as you have a good process in place.
That is a wealth of great information, Mark. Thank you for that, and hopefully everybody out there was able to write that down very, very quickly and thoroughly. It's a playbook right there, how to be able to make the most out of some of the challenges we're going through right now. From a financial planning standpoint, Paulina, if I'm a dealer, what do I need to be doing and how do I need to be looking at this?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about planning, and I thought Courtney and Mark both brought up a lot of other good examples, but the one maybe that hasn't been brought up yet is just surrounding yourself with the right people who can help you. And we talk about this all the time. You really need to surround yourself with reliable teams of advisors. Running a dealership already demands your full-time attention. Trying to plan for your taxes, for your estate, for your exit, for your retirement, for a potential sale, on top of all the daily operations that will now include, tariff uncertainty. That's not just overwhelming. I personally think it's risky. So the stakes are really too high to do this solo, and that's why we recommend that you build out a team of advisors with industry experience that can be very precise and put a plan in place for you. We always strongly recommend that dealers join a 20 group if you're not part of one already, to learn not only from your peers, but also folks like Mark. You need a good accountant who can proactively help you minimize taxes. You're going to need a legal partner that can help you protect your family, a good business broker who can help you maximize proceeds and even minimize taxes whenever it is that you choose to sell, and a financial planner to coordinate your wealth for you, so you're not really quarterbacking everything on top of trying to run your own store. So maybe the good analogy here is that, think of it this way: you wouldn't let somebody randomly off the street with a wrench working on a $10,000, $20,000 piece of equipment. Why would we want somebody to DIY just the financial engine that's ultimately, your future? And we do believe that a strong team can bring, a new perspective. Maybe expertise that you're not required and shouldn't have to know, and even to help you, avoid any blind spots and just uncover opportunities that may be ahead of you. So that's the one thing I probably want to add.
Thank you. And you brought up a few key points, and a few of the questions we've had you comment on today. Writing out your goals, putting together a team, developing a written plan. I'm just going to add one thing to it. Be sure when you do have that proactive plan, and you've heard that from Paulina on the financial planning side and Mark from the business operational side, having a plan. On our end, when it comes to the financial plan, meet quarterly with your team to review and tweak. Many of you have heard that a plane flying from New York to LA is off track 98% of the time. The only way it gets to LA is regular turns by the pilot to be able to stay on track, and you need to do the same. There's also, it's been said during challenges like this, a lot of times it creates the greatest level or amount of opportunity out there if you know where to look and to look. So if I'm a dealer looking for opportunity at a time like this, Courtney, what would you suggest or recommend?
Well, I mean, that could go two ways: an opportunity I'm looking to sell, or an opportunity I'm looking to buy. Again, going back to what Mark brought up, which I hear time and time again, and I've noticed a trend that the dealers that I'm hearing it from typically have been in an ownership, kind of within that 10-year mark, and realizing the relationship between the dealer and the OEM, where they feel, forced to order the product, shoving it down their throat. And I know Mark has talked about this, like pushing back. There are ways that you can push back, that you don't have to take all of this inventory. And I think finally, dealers are getting a voice, and they're not, just taking all of this inventory. I see it all the time on balance sheets and floor plan interest. I mean, and I hear it and they're like, well, we ordered all this inventory, we got this rebate and, we thought we're going to move through it and we couldn't. And now it's affecting their orders, for the upcoming year, what they're, they have there. And it's just like this, I don't know, just a funnel of, inventory that's just sitting there. I mean, I have dealers that have 2023 still sitting on the floor. Like there's with toddlers, toddler bikes, like, and a handful of 2024s and, they can only get so many 2025s, and with the rebates and the pricing and all of this, it's become just the perfect storm again. And then the other opportunity, which again, Mark spoke about, is that pre-owned. If we learned nothing through COVID was, so many dealers are only worried about moving that new product in the pre-owned. And again, I see it on the financials. I see, the ratios of, new versus used, and the dealers that learned, dealers do have to have somebody that they can trust. If they're not in the dealership to do the buying themselves, that, that is a position that they really have to trust somebody, being in. But we have seen how resilient, that pre-owned, those pre-owned units, have been. And then, obviously on the buying side, if you're in a position, obviously you need to be, if you're looking at a franchise dealership, you have to be in the good graces if you carry, that particular franchise, your KPIs have to be there, your North Star rewards, this and that. And if you're in a price and well capitalized and looking to grow, I mean, yeah, it's turned into a buyer's market. So there's plenty of, potential opportunity there. Although again, I'll say, buyers are being a lot more conservative, than we've ever seen. And then, Brad, you mentioned something about pilot and this and that, and it just takes me back to like thinking about air traffic control, right? It's like, it's been a mess. And it really, what I see is that the leadership starts from the top down, and the dealers that I find that are absentee owners, that are not in their numbers every single day, knowing what's going on, are the ones that I get and I'm going, wow, it becomes a very blunt and uncomfortable conversation. And that's where you don't want to be if you're looking to sell now, because you had, a GM that you thought you could trust in there for the last 3 years, buying all this, not wanting to sell the units at a loss, holding on to it because they think they're going to do it. And, like Mark said, that's sometimes when we see those dealers and those gross profits have tanked because they're selling underneath, it's an effect, it's affecting the neighboring dealers, and it's just a domino effect, and I think we're all kind of rolling in the mud together right now going, okay, we're going to figure this out. Like, there's hope. It's, it's not all doom and gloom, but again, it's, coming out of COVID, trying to figure that out, change of the administration, tariffs, everything. It's just, it's creating that, that unrest that we're in again.
We see a lot of challenges out there, and you bring up a good point. And, not being, we'll call it an absentee owner. I know a good friend of mine always said, employees don't respect what you don't inspect. So you got to have some levels of quality control, and especially now where things are a little bit more challenging, be a little bit more hands-on. Mark, anything else to add?
I gotta fully agree with Courtney. I say it all the time because I see it all the time. Absentee ownership in our industry doesn't work. The margins are too low, and it's those pennies that make the difference between making money and losing money. So just a recipe for disaster if the owner's not there and very engaged in what's going on, especially with many of us having so many brands under the roof. I'm still very engaged in our dealership, so I'll kind of speak from the dealership level. One of the things that I do on a daily basis is look at what our open orders are with the manufacturers, what we've sold, what we've got coming in. The market is very volatile, and the model that was hot 2 months ago may have completely turned off. And so even if a manufacturer doesn't provide a program where you can adjust your outstanding orders, I don't hesitate to put that in an email and send it to the OEM and say, hey, can you do something for me? And so, and in a lot of cases have good success with that. So there's not a day that goes by where we're not trying to manage our orders and our inventory to meet market demand. not afraid to ask for deals. When I find out that a manufacturer's got a bunch of excess stock and maybe it's last year's model, I'll ask for a 10 or 15% discount, or ask to get a freight discount. And a lot of times we can find a middle ground where we get stuff, and that's been very good at our dealership. We like to purchase distressed inventory when I find out that dealers are going out of business. We will oftentimes reach out to the rep and say, hey, we're willing to take everything lock, stock, and barrel, but we're not going to pay dealer costs for it. We're going to pay significantly less, but we'll make that process easy for you. On the sales floor, we always ask for down payments from customers. I think the biggest mistake that dealers continue to make on the sales floor is promoting zero down and no down payments. It's just a failure on every front. You're losing a negotiating point with the customer. You're not putting that customer in a position where they're going to be in an equity position, in a year or two down the road. And you set your finance department up for failure as well, because a lot of times we're hitting loan caps. I know that, some of the lenders love to advertise zero down, but it's literally the worst thing in the world that we can do as a dealership. And so I, constantly recommend that, dealers look at, every deal that they're financing. And if they're taking these zero down deals, then want to figure out why and what training we can do with the sales staff to modify that. And then just look for middle ground. Again, we're in a very uncertain time in our economy, and you can take on a lot of excess inventory today, but that's inventory is just another word for risk. And the more that you take on, the more risk that you're taking on. And if we have a problematic year, if the economy isn't as resilient as we hope it's going to be, that inventory is going to take a lot of dealers down. So, find that middle ground, cater to your market. Don't worry about these manufacturer programs that drive volume at the expense of margin. Just do the right thing for your business and your market. So that's what I got.
Very good. Great advice. Thank you, Mark. Pauline, as we're finishing things up, can you maybe discuss how NPDA and NPDA partners may be able to help dealers during this time?
Sure, and maybe as we dive into those remarks, since we're almost up on time and we'll hop into Q&A shortly, for all the dealers on the line with us, there is a Q&A button towards the bottom of your page. You're welcome to bring that up and submit your questions. All of us on the line want to carve out at least 10 to 15 minutes for anything that's top of mind to you. So as we go through our final remarks, feel free to start submitting questions. We'll get to them shortly. We brainstormed on this together, all of the panelists on the line. We're all NPDA partners. And we realized that you've obviously spent years, if not decades, just building up your dealership. You've put in the work, taken the risks, made the tough calls, and we get it. It's not easy, and it's not luck. You've earned everything that you have, but it's a year like this where everything gets put into question. So we've said this before, but whether you're thinking about selling soon or if you just want to be prepared on what happens next, let's take the time to really develop a plan for you. And that's why we as NPDA partners, that's where we're able to help with a dealer wealth roadmap. Our job is to help you protect what you've built, maximize what it's worth, and really make sure that your next chapter, whatever that may look like, is set up for success. So how we can help in the form of 2 meetings, 60 minutes each, a total of a 2-hour commitment. You'll get an opinion of value from Courtney just to help you understand what your dealership is worth today. Our team at Morgan Stanley will put together a written wealth plan that maps out your walkaway numbers, strategies to further minimize tax, address any gaps and blind spots in your dealership and personal financials. And you also get to keep that plan for your records. Mark has also offered to share his email at the end of the webinar, so that if you are on the line today and you want to reach out to him with a question or 20 group involvement, you have a way to reach him directly. And if you'd like to take advantage of any of those educational offerings, take a moment to fill out the final survey that's going to pop up on your screen here in just a moment. And we've had quite a few questions come in for a Q&A. So on the back end, let's go ahead and fill out the last survey. We will organize the questions and we'll be back with you in roughly 90 seconds to kick off the Q&A portion of the session.
do, 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 do,
Mhm.
do, 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 do,
Keep
do,
going,
do.
Mark.
This is when
I think there's,
cats
I
make.
think there's, I think there's two verses. Second one's in a different octave.
Few questions come in. Very good. We'll give everyone 10 more seconds here before we close out the poll, and we'll get started with the Q&A. And the first question that we have, and I'm not sure, Dave, if we can run a live poll, but how many feel they have the right level, too little or too much of new inventory right now? And maybe Mark, you can speak to that a little bit more since you work closely with dealers. Not sure if you have any insights.
I've got a, hopefully, I saw somebody said they couldn't hear, probably me not being close enough to the speaker, but I just have a personal threshold that dealers should manage at least 3 turns on their new inventory. And as an industry, we're pacing this year to end up, but at least right now, probably at 2.1 or 2.2 on the high side, and possibly less than 2 at this point in time. I would say that 80% of dealers have too much inventory based on the math. I just think that running any less than 3 turns on new inventory is just taking on too much risk. So you don't have the ability to adjust. When you're sitting on a 6-month supply of inventory, uh, it's just too much. It locks a dealer in to not being flexible to what the market really desires. And I tend to find it's funny when a manufacturer comes to me and says, "Hey, we've got a program where you can get 180 days of free flooring." I don't care. If I'm going to order product and it's going to take me 180 days to sell it on average, I don't want it. It's not the right product. Give me. I think, very controversial statement. I've long said that as an industry, we would be better if we didn't have free flooring. So just, have dealers order the product they need to sell in a 30 to 60-day window. We would be a better industry. But free flooring is never free.
And Courtney, you probably see a lot of financials too and levels of inventory. Anything else you want to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, it's interesting because this has happened in the last 48 hours. Typically during a buy sell, the new units just go to the buyer on the flooring. But when you have new units, like I said, that are toddlers and then their siblings that are Irish twins almost, it's like the new buyer doesn't want to absorb the mistakes of the outgoing seller, and we've had to get very creative, and never once did I think I'd be negotiating through list of new inventory, trying to figure out how to make it work for everybody. And that's essentially what's happening. I'm used to it on the pre-owned. We usually we go back and forth negotiating on that, but I've never had to do it on new units. So I'm hoping it's kind of a one-off situation. I was looking at stock numbers and cost and retail and clean trade, and I'm just getting very just really having to dive in to say, how does this work for everyone?
If you were facilitating a buy sell today and a dealer still had 20 new 2023s on the floor, what do you think realistically that the dealer, what haircut should the dealer be willing to take on that new 2023 inventory for the new buyer to take it?
So we were looking at negotiating clean trade for it. I mean, sometimes, the devil's in the details. There's, component of seller financing, that came into play, some signage updates. So there are a lot of different moving components that I said, okay, I need both sides to tell me what your pain points are, and I'm going to compartmentalize them And then I'm, going to break it out and go back to each side and say, okay, he's willing to give on this, buyer's willing, to give on this. And it's almost a wash. I'm, fortunate that, the buyer stepped up to the plate, and has several locations and said, you know what, let's do a dealer trade now. Let's start moving these so they don't become an issue, several months down the road when we're out of season, which becomes an even bigger problem. Right. So yeah, it's interesting because when you see the delta of what retail is versus what the cost is, and you add up, it's scary.
I'm constantly amazed at the unintended consequences of the pay plans that dealers utilize. If you got, your sales manager and your sales team, if they're only paid on the gross profit or available income for the units that they sell, what incentive is there to sell something that, is a year and a half old that you're potentially going to lose money on?
So I think that's where the transparency mark comes in, though, is how many sales managers and maybe even general managers are not seeing the numbers. I think they have this number in their head that they, feel like they have to move the unit at. They really don't see the behind the scenes of what's going on until it's too late.
I would say that's very common. I've been amazed in a lot of the consulting that I've done over the last 10 years when, I sit down with department managers for big operations. I'm talking 40, $50 million dealerships, and parts manager doesn't even know how to calculate a turn ratio, or sales manager has no idea what their top 10 oldest units are. Nobody's ever done an inventory on used. And so maybe they got 3 or 4 machines on the books that don't even exist anymore. Seems to be a very common failure in our inventory that, we don't want to share all the data because, then they might know too much.
Right.
Don't get it.
And Courtney, we actually had somebody in the audience respond back with a suggested 10 to 15%. Does that sound in line as well, or?
It's more than that. Believe me, I've been here the last 2 nights very late trying to figure out what that number looked like. And sometimes we did it, when the turn was 2023 units were an issue. That dealers would take like 1,500 off invoice or only agree to take X amount of units. But the problem is the seller doesn't have a way to move these units because they are no longer a dealer. So it's okay, maybe, consignment, if the buyer's willing to let the bike sit there on a consignment, or, take them to auction because you can't take them down the road to sell them. So.
And we have one more question that came in. Courtney, I'll steer this one your way. Is there more than one way to value a dealership? Because you hear all about this industry talk and different takes on what that may be really worth.
Yeah. And I think if you've ever sat on any of the webinars before, we always say it, it's an art and a science. I think it's becoming more of an art. I'm just picking out my watercolors and a paintbrush and going what I feel like today. No, there's definitely a bunch of different ways to value it. I guess 3 of the ways to just sum it up quickly is, there's an asset approach, there's a market value approach, and then there's an earnings approach. And I would say that we are definitely seeing a lot of it, asset-based approach, where there's not a lot of goodwill, if any, right now, factored into it. I know the RV and marine side is seeing that, heavily. I'm not seeing it as much on my side just yet. And then the earnings approach, and boy, is that fun, because I'm going back to 18 to see what was happening, prior to COVID, because as I said, the COVID numbers weren't sustainable. The people that, sailed off into the sunset, with a sell during, that time, good for them. But, how do you sell a business that, has been losing money for a period of time? It's looking like they may break even, for, this year, and then all the unknowns that we factored in there. So it's definitely challenging. And, if you've been on a call with me, if I've ever done, evaluation for you, I go through all of those scenarios and paint the picture really, what we're dealing with right now.
I'm not in your industry, but I can tell you the question that I dislike the most getting is, what's the multiples that are being paid when I sell my dealership? And, I always turn
Oh,
around and I'm like,
Paulina.
yeah, I mean, you're running all your expenses through the dealership. You're running your kids' college, your wife's car, your grandmother's health insurance. You've done everything you can to reduce profitability for the last 20 years so you don't pay any taxes. And now you're not making any money. The multiple could be 1,000 because 1,000 times 0 is still 0.
And that's exactly what Paulina and I were talking about. I go, Paulina, how do you do a multiple on a negative? And buyers, several years ago, even for dealers that were not doing well, we're still willing to pay for what they thought, future profitability was. And that's kind of going, by the wayside, right now, because everybody's going, I don't see a future profitability, right now. So sometimes that goes back to, just the market, if there's somebody in your market, that, has 1 or 2 franchises, missing from their current rooftop, they're willing to pay for that. So we have those situations, but the multiple question.
You need to come up
Every
with some
webinar.
snappy phrase. Like, if you want to sell a business, treat it like a business.
We'll take that offline, Mark.
Yeah.
Good. And that was actually our last Q&A question. So I think just to be mindful of everyone's time, we're almost up on the hour. If you've sat in on our prior webinars, we always like to wrap up with a quote. So the quote for today is, "Planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now." We really hope you got some value and insights from our webinar today. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you on again soon.
Thanks,
guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good Memorial Day.
Yeah, appreciate everybody's participation. And make sure you guys take advantage of the Standing Hat Group at Morgan Stanley with their offer. That is a fantastic setup they have for you. Again, it's just that hour call. And I've talked to many dealers who've done it. And it's eye-opening and beneficial in all sorts of different ways. So I'll give you a recap PDF tomorrow of the call here with everybody's contact information and such. A link to the replay for your fellow dealers who from your shop who might have an interest in it. And also I'm going to send a link out to, got a couple folks on here who are not current NPDA members. This is probably worth the $395 membership fee. And if you disagree, we can talk about that. But I'll send you guys a link to become a member as well. They will be going forward. It's a $79.99 fee. Which is probably the cheapest deal in power sports as far as I'm concerned. So, but yeah, appreciate everybody spending the time with us. Again, have a great Memorial Day. I'm going to be out of the mix here, so don't be trying to contact me for 2 weeks. I'm going to be in Germany with the fam and getting back to our next one will be with Zach Matern talking about property and casualty risk management. And until then, on behalf of this crew here, we appreciate your time again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So long.
Thanks, Dave.